The security footage would later show exactly when it happened at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, the moment Vivian Corleone shattered a $15,000 sculpture in the main corridor of Ashford Elite Academy, and not a single person dared to stop her. Hey everyone, welcome back to Unbroken Truths. Before we dive into this incredible story, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, because the stories we share here will change the way you see the world. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now back to Vivian. The daughter of tech mogul Richard Corleone wasn't just wealthy, she was untouchable. 19 years old, cold as winter marble and carrying enough rage to burn down everything her father's billions had built. The academy's marble floors had witnessed her fury before. 3 expelled students, 14 resigned teachers, and 1 hospitalized guidance counselor who made the mistake of asking about her mother. But that Tuesday was different, because that was the day Thomas Baxter walked through those gilded doors with a mop bucket, a worn-out backpack, and a secret that would unravel everything Vivian thought she knew about strength. He was 42, widowed for 3 years, with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much loss. The other staff members whispered when he passed, not because he was new, but because of the way he moved. Like a man carrying invisible weight. Like someone who understood that survival sometimes means showing up, even when your heart is buried 6 feet under. Vivian saw him for the first time while she was screaming at Dean Patterson about a B-plus grade she didn't deserve. Her voice echoed through the administrative hallway, sharp enough to make interns flinch. "My father funds half of this academy? You think a B-plus is acceptable?" Thomas was mopping near the water fountain, methodical, quiet. When her furious gaze landed on him, most people would have looked away. He didn't. He met her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, not challenging, not afraid, just present. Then he went back to his work. It was the first time in 4 years that someone looked at Vivian Corleone and didn't see a weapon. She felt something crack inside her chest, something small, something she immediately tried to crush. "What are you staring at?" she snapped, her voice like breaking glass. Thomas straightened slowly, resting the mop against the wall. His voice was low, steady. "Nothing, miss. Just doing my job." "Then do it somewhere else." He nodded once, picked up his bucket, and walked away. No argument, no fear, no reaction. And that was what made her hands start shaking. Because Vivian Corleone had spent 4 years perfecting the art of making people afraid. She had turned cruelty into armor, rage into a language everyone understood. Teachers cowered, students scattered, even her father's bodyguards kept their distance. But this janitor, this nobody with his faded uniform and tired eyes, had looked at her like she was just another person. Not a monster. Not a princess. Just someone. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She lay in her penthouse bedroom overlooking the city, surrounded by luxury she stopped noticing years ago, and all she could think about was the way Thomas Baxter had said, "Nothing, miss. Just doing my job." No tremor in his voice, no calculation, no performance, just the truth. By morning, she convinced herself it meant nothing. Another invisible employee in a building full of them. She forgot his face by Friday, but Thursday morning she saw him again. He was in the East Wing, fixing a broken locker some student had kicked in. His daughter sat, cross-legged on the floor beside him, maybe 9 years old, with wild curls pulled into an uneven ponytail and a sketchbook spread across her lap. "Dad, do you think clouds get lonely?" the little girl asked, her pencil moving across the paper. Thomas actually smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Why would they be lonely, Clarice?" "Because they're always floating, never staying anywhere." He paused, wrench in hand, and looked at his daughter with such pure, unguarded love that Vivian felt like she had been punched. "Maybe they're not lonely," Thomas said softly. "Maybe they're free." Clarice Baxter looked up at her father and grinned. "I like that better." Vivian stood frozen in the hallway, 30 feet away, watching this tiny moment of perfect, ordinary love. She hadn't spoken to her own father in 6 months, hadn't felt anything close to warmth since her mother's funeral when she was 15. And here was this janitor, this man who probably earned less in a year than she spent on handbags, radiating something she'd forgotten existed. Thomas glanced up and saw her watching. For a moment, their eyes met again. This time, Vivian was the one who looked away first. She walked quickly toward her next class, her heart hammering against her ribs for reasons she couldn't name. Behind her, Clarice whispered to her father, "Dad, why does that girl always look so sad?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He just tightened the last screw on the locker, closed his toolbox, and said quietly, "Sometimes, Clarice, the people who have everything are the ones who've lost the most." Vivian was already around the corner, but somehow she heard him anyway. The thing about Vivian Corleone that nobody understood, not the therapists her father hired, not the teachers who quit, not even Richard Corleone himself, was that she didn't want to be cruel. She needed to be. 4 years ago, when her mother died of an aneurysm in the middle of a charity gala, 15-year-old Vivian had watched her father receive the news with the same expression he used during board meetings. He excused himself for exactly 12 minutes. When he returned, he gave a speech about his wife's legacy, announced a memorial foundation in her name, and networked for another 2 hours before finally going home. Vivian had learned something that night. Emotions were liabilities. Vulnerability was weakness, and if you wanted to survive in a world built on power and money, you had to become untouchable. So she did. She turned her grief into a fortress, her pain into a weapon, and her loneliness into a crown that kept everyone at arm's length. Now, 3 days after first seeing Thomas Baxter, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked at his daughter. Like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Like love wasn't a transaction or a performance, it was just real. Friday morning, Vivian arrived at the academy an hour early. She told herself it was to study, but when she found herself walking past the custodial office near the service entrance, she knew she was lying. Thomas was inside, preparing his cleaning cart. Through the small window, she could see Clarice sitting on a metal folding chair, swinging her legs and eating cereal from a plastic container. "Dad, can we go to the park after work?" Clarice asked between bites. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. I've got the second shift at the warehouse tonight." "You work too much." Thomas knelt down to eye level with his daughter, tucking a curl behind her ear. "I work enough to keep us safe. That's different." "But you're always tired." "Tired is okay. Tired means I'm taking care of you, and that's all that matters." Clarice threw her arms around his neck, spilling a little cereal in the process. They both laughed. Vivian felt something twist violently in her chest, not from jealousy exactly, but a deep, aching recognition of something she lost and didn't know how to find again. She turned to leave, but her designer heel caught on the tile and she stumbled, catching herself against the wall with a sharp gasp. The door opened. Thomas stood in the doorway, concerned, flickering across his face. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Vivian said too quickly, straightening her blazer. "I was just looking for something?" "No, yes, I don't know." She hated how flustered she sounded. "I wasn't spying if that's what you think." "I didn't think that." Behind him, Clarice appeared, tilting her head curiously. "Hi, you're the sad painting girl." Vivian blinked. "Excuse me? I saw your art in the gallery last week. It was really good, but really sad. Lots of gray and black. Do you not like colors?" Thomas placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Clarice, that's not." "I like colors," Vivian interrupted, surprising herself. She crouched down slightly, meeting Clarice's eyes. "I just forgot how to use them." Clarice considered this seriously. "My dad says when you forget something important, you just have to practice remembering, like riding a bike." "Is that what your dad says?" "Yep, he's really smart. Not school smart, but heart smart." She tapped her chest proudly. Vivian felt her throat tighten. When was the last time someone had described her father as anything other than powerful or brilliant or ruthless? Thomas cleared his throat gently. "We should let you get to class, Miss Corleone. You know my name. Everyone knows your name." "That's not what I meant." Vivian stood, brushing invisible dust off her skirt. "I meant, you don't seem afraid of it." Thomas studied her for a moment, not with judgment, but with something that looked almost like understanding. "Should I be?" The question hung in the air between them. Vivian had spent 4 years making sure the answer was yes. She built her entire identity around being feared, respected, untouchable. But standing here in this dim hallway with a janitor and his daughter, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to be afraid. She wanted the opposite. "No," she whispered, "you shouldn't." Then she turned and walked away before either of them could see the tears forming in her eyes. Later that day, Vivian sat in advanced literature, staring at her copy of Wuthering Heights without reading a single word. Across the room, her classmates whispered about weekend plans, parties at family estates, yacht trips to the Mediterranean. She was invited to all of them. She declined all of them. Professor Chen was discussing Heathcliff's obsession with Catherine when Vivian's phone buzzed silently in her lap. "Dad, board meeting in Singapore next week. Wire transfer approved for spring break. Go anywhere you want. No, how are you? No, miss you. Just logistics and money." Vivian typed back, "Okay." She didn't mention that she spent the last 3 spring breaks alone in the penthouse, ordering room service and pretending she had somewhere better to be. The class ended. Students flooded out. Vivian stayed in her seat, staring at the empty desk in front of her. "Miss Corleone?" Professor Chen approached carefully. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. You've seemed distant lately, more than usual." Vivian looked up sharply. "And that concerns you because?" Professor Chen didn't flinch at one of the few teachers who lasted more than a semester. "Because despite what you want everyone to believe, I don't think you enjoy being alone." The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian gathered her books and stood abruptly. "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not," Professor Chen said softly, "but I know loneliness when I see it." Vivian left without responding. She walked through the academy's halls, past the trophy cases and marble columns and gilded portraits of distinguished alumni. Everything gleamed. Everything was perfect. Everything was empty. She found herself drawn back toward the east wing, where Thomas had been fixing the locker, where he and Clarice had talked about clouds and freedom. The hallway was empty now, just polished floors and afternoon light streaming through tall windows. But on the wall near the repaired locker, someone had taped a small drawing. Vivian stepped closer. It was Clarice's sketch, a crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. A man, a little girl, and another figure with long dark hair. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, "Everyone needs sunshine." Vivian's hand trembled as she reached out, her fingers hovering inches from the paper. She hadn't been anyone's sunshine in 4 years. Wasn't sure she remembered how. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke quietly. "She left that for you." Vivian turned. Thomas stood at the end of the hallway, mop in hand, watching her with those steady, knowing eyes. "Why?" Vivian's voice cracked despite her best efforts. Thomas walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "Because she thinks you need a friend, and Clarice has a way of seeing things the rest of us miss." "I don't need friends. Everyone needs friends, Miss Corleone." "Not me." "Why not?" The question was so simple, so direct, that Vivian's carefully constructed walls began to crack. "Because friends leave," she whispered, "or they die, or they realize you're not worth the effort, so it's easier to just be alone, be safe." Thomas set down his mop, leaning against it thoughtfully. "You know what I learned when my wife died 3 years ago?" Vivian's breath caught. "You're widowed?" "Sarah passed away when Clarice was 6 of breast cancer. We had 8 months from diagnosis to—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Anyway, I spent those 8 months terrified, angry, convinced that if I loved her hard enough, I could somehow keep her here. Did it work? No." Thomas smiled sadly. "But you know what worked? Letting myself love her anyway, every single day until the end, because the alternative of pushing her away to avoid the pain would have meant losing her twice." Vivian felt tears spilling down her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. "I lost my mom 4 years ago," she heard herself say. "And my dad, he just moved on, like she never existed, like grief was something you schedule between conference calls, and you decided if he could turn off his heart, so could you." Something like that. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I tell you something my daughter said last week?" Vivian nodded, not trusting her voice. "She asked me why some people smile even when they're sad, and I told her it's because they've learned something important, that feeling pain means you're still alive, still capable of love. And that's not weakness, Miss Corleone. That's the bravest thing a person can do." Vivian looked at this man, this grieving widower who worked 2 jobs and raised a daughter alone, and somehow still had room in his heart for kindness, and realized something that terrified her. She wanted to be brave like that. She wanted to feel it again. "I don't know how," she whispered. Thomas smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to practice remembering." He picked up his mop and started walking away, leaving Vivian alone with Clarice's drawing and a tiny, fragile seed of hope beginning to take root in her chest. For the first time in 4 years, Vivian Corleone wondered if maybe it was possible to let someone in without falling apart. Monday morning started like any other, until it didn't. Vivian arrived at the academy to find police cars in the parking lot and students clustering around their phones, whispering urgently. "What happened?" she asked no one in particular. A sophomore turned, eyes wide. "Someone broke into the custodial office over the weekend, stole equipment, trashed the place. They're saying it was vandalism, but what?" But Mr. Baxter's personal locker was targeted. His daughter's medication for asthma, it's gone, and his wallet. Everything. Vivian's blood ran cold. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the surprised looks, and found Thomas sitting on a bench outside the administrative office. His head was in his hands. A police officer stood nearby taking notes. Clarice wasn't with him. "Where's your daughter?" Vivian demanded, her voice sharper than intended. Thomas looked up, exhausted, at friend's house. "She doesn't know yet. I didn't want to scare her before school." "The medication. I've got maybe 2 days' worth at home. After that," he rubbed his face, "the prescription costs $340 to refill. I don't get paid until Friday and after rent." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The police officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Baxter, we'll do what we can, but without security footage in that area. I understand. Thank you." The officer left. Thomas stood slowly, picking up his cleaning cart like nothing had happened, like his world wasn't crumbling. "What are you doing?" Vivian asked. "Going to work." "You can't be serious." "I've got floors to clean, toilets to fix. Bills don't stop because someone stole from me." His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Vivian felt fury rising in her chest, not at him, but for him. "This is insane. You need to." "Need to what, Miss Corleone?" Thomas met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of his exhaustion. "File a report I can't afford to follow up on? Miss work and risk losing this job? Take Clarice out of school to sit in emergency rooms we can't pay for? There has to be something." "There isn't." He started pushing the cart down the hallway. "But I appreciate your concern." "Wait." The word came out before Vivian could stop it. Thomas paused but didn't turn around. Vivian's mind raced. She could pay for the medication in seconds. One text to her father's assistant. But something about the way Thomas held himself proud, despite everything, told her that charity would destroy whatever fragile trust they built. So instead she said, "Let me help you look. Maybe whoever did this left evidence, something the police missed." Thomas turned slowly, surprise flickering across his face. "You want to help me search the custodial office? Unless you have a better idea." For a long moment he just stared at her. Then quietly, "Why?" "Because," Vivian stopped, the truth catching in her throat. "Because your daughter drew me a sunshine. Because you looked at me like I was human. Because for the first time in 4 years, I want to do something that matters. Because it's not fair," she said finally, "and I'm tired of watching unfair things happen." Thomas studied her face, searching for mockery or ulterior motives. He found neither. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay." They walked together toward the service entrance, an unlikely pair, the billionaire's daughter and the janitor, united by something neither of them fully understood yet. Behind them, students whispered and phones clicked, capturing the moment Vivian Corleone chose a side for the first time in her life. And somewhere in the academy's east wing, Clarice's crayon drawing still hung on the wall, 3 figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. The storm was just beginning, but maybe they'd face it together. The custodial office looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Cleaning supplies spilled across the floor, metal shelves overturned, Thomas's small desk drawer hanging open and empty. Someone hadn't just stolen, they wanted to send a message. Vivian stood in the doorway, her designer heels crunching on broken glass. This wasn't random. "No," Thomas agreed quietly, kneeling to pick up scattered photographs. Pictures of Clarice at the park, blowing out birthday candles, holding up a drawing. "It wasn't. You know who did this?" It wasn't a question. Thomas's jaw tightened. I have a suspicion. Then tell the police. And say what? I think it was Derek Chen, a senior whose father sits on the academy's board. A kid I caught vandalizing the boys' locker room last month and reported to the principal. Thomas carefully gathered the photos, his hands trembling slightly. You think the police will believe the janitor over a family that donates 6 figures annually? Vivian felt anger flood through her veins. That's exactly what they should. Should and will are two different things, Miss Corleone. You live in a world where your last name opens doors. I live in one where mine closes them. The truth of his words hit her like cold water. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her father's head of security. Heard about an incident at the academy. Advise you stay clear of staff conflicts. Optics matter. Her father was 35,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, and somehow he already knew, and his first concern was how it looked. Vivian deleted the message. I'm going to find Derek, she said, turning toward the door. Thomas stood quickly. Don't. It'll only make things worse than stealing medication from a 9-year-old. Worse for you. You go after Derek, and suddenly you're the story. The billionaire's daughter defended the janitor. Your father's competitors will use it. The media will twist it. And Derek's family will make sure I'm fired by Friday. So you just accept it? I survived it. Thomas's voice was steady but tired. There's a difference. Vivian stared at him. This man who lost his wife, who worked 2 jobs, who couldn't afford his daughter's medication, and still had more dignity than anyone she ever knew. I don't accept it, she said quietly. And I'm not going to. Before Thomas could stop her, she walked out. She found Derek Chen 20 minutes later in the senior lounge, sprawled across a leather couch with 3 of his friends, laughing about something on his phone. The room went quiet when Vivian entered. Well, Derek drawled, not bothering to sit up. The Ice Queen herself. To what do we owe the honor? Vivian walked straight up to him, her voice low and lethal. Return what you took. Derek's smirk widened. I have no idea what you're talking about. The custodial office, the medication, the wallet. Return it, or I'll make sure every college you applied to knows exactly what kind of person you are. His friends shifted uncomfortably, but Derek just laughed. You're threatening me, Corleone? That's rich. What are you, the janitor's bodyguard now? I'm someone who's tired of watching entitled cowards hurt people who can't fight back. Derek stood slowly, his height advantage obvious. Careful. My father funds the new science wing. One word from him, and your little cleaning buddy loses more than his medication. And one word from my father, and your family loses their board seat. Your father doesn't care about janitors. Try me. For a moment, Derek's confidence flickered. Everyone knew the Corleone name carried weight, the kind that could reshape futures with a single phone call. But then his smirk returned. You know what I think? I think you've got a crush. Vivian Corleone, falling for the help. That's adorable. His friend snickered. Vivian felt her face flush, but not with embarrassment or rage. You have until tomorrow morning. Return everything, or I'll bury you. She turned and walked out, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard Derek mutter, She's absolutely lost it. But for the first time in 4 years, losing control felt like the sanest thing she'd ever done. That evening, Vivian did something she hadn't done in months. She called her father. It rang 4 times before his assistant answered. Miss Corleone, your father is in a meeting. Tell him it's important. A pause. He said 5 minutes. When Richard Corleone's voice came through, it was clipped and distracted. Vivian, what is it? I'm about to negotiate a merger. I need you to do something. Wire transfer? Already approved for. No, I need you to make a phone call. Silence. Then, cautiously, what kind of call? Vivian explained Derek, the theft, Thomas, Clarice's medication. She kept her voice steady, professional, the way her father had taught her. When she finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to intervene in a staff matter because of a janitor. I'm asking you to do the right thing. The right thing is complicated, Vivian. The Chen family, I don't care about the Chen family. Her voice cracked. I care about a 9-year-old girl who can't breathe without medication some entitled brat stole because his ego was bruised. Another pause. Longer this time. When did you start caring about other people? Richard asked, and there was something in his voice Vivian couldn't quite identify. Surprise? Curiosity? Recently, she whispered. I'm trying to remember how. The line went silent except for the faint sound of background negotiations. Then, I'll make the call. But Vivian, this changed things. People will talk. Your reputation. I don't care about my reputation anymore, Dad. I care about being someone I don't hate when I look in the mirror. Richard Corleone exhaled slowly. You sound like your mother. Vivian's throat tightened. They hadn't talked about her mother in 4 years. Is that a bad thing? She asked quietly. No, her father said, and his voice softened in a way she almost forgot. No, it's not. He hung up. Vivian sat in her car in the academy parking lot, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Thomas. Clarice wanted me to tell you thank you for being our friend. She drew you another picture. TB attached was a photo, a crayon drawing of a girl with dark hair wearing a crown made of sunshine. Vivian pressed the phone to her chest and let herself cry, not from sadness, but from the terrifying, wonderful feeling of her heart remembering how to break open instead of just breaking. The next morning, Derek Chen didn't show up to school. By lunch, word had spread. The Chen family was under investigation for multiple code violations in their real estate holdings. Derek had been quietly expelled, and a large anonymous donation had been made to the Academy's staff emergency fund specifically earmarked for medical expenses. Thomas found Vivian in the library during the 5th period. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. I know. But you did anyway. I did. Thomas studied her for a long moment and asked why. Vivian looked up from her book, meeting his eyes. Because your daughter thinks I'm sunshine, and I'm tired of proving her wrong. A slow smile spread across Thomas's face, genuine, warm, transformative. For what it's worth, he said softly, I think she might be right. Vivian felt her own smile forming, fragile and unfamiliar but real. Don't get used to it, she said. I'm still figuring this whole decent human thing out. Aren't we all? He stood to leave, then paused. Vivian? It was the first time he'd used her first name. Yeah? Thank you. After he left, Vivian sat in the quiet library, surrounded by books and afternoon light, and realized something extraordinary. For the first time since her mother died, she didn't feel alone. And that terrified her almost as much as it healed her. If you're loving this story, drop a comment and let me know what you think happens next. And don't forget to subscribe, we've got more incredible truths to uncover together. 3 weeks later, everything shattered. Vivian was helping Thomas organize donated school supplies in the storage room when Clarice burst through the door, her face streaked with tears. Dad, they're saying... She couldn't finish, sobbing too hard to speak. Thomas dropped everything, pulling his daughter close. Hey, what's wrong, sweetheart? The kids at school say you're going to leave. That Miss Vivian's dad is sending you away because we're not rich enough to be here. Vivian's blood went cold. What? Thomas's face darkened. Clarice, who told you that? Everyone. They say Mr. Corleone is cleaning the house, getting rid of all the she hiccuped, all the poor people. Vivian's phone buzzed. A news alert. Corleone Tech announces major restructuring. Ashford Elite Academy partnership under review. Her hands shook as she opened the full article. Her father was consolidating operations, cutting costs. The Academy's service contracts were being renegotiated, which meant every custodian, cafeteria worker, and support staff member was at risk, including Thomas. No, Vivian whispered. No, he wouldn't. But even as she said it, she knew. Her father always chose profit over people. He just never cared before. Never had a reason to. Thomas met her eyes, and in that moment, she saw something that broke her. Resignation. Like he knew all along this was temporary. Like he knew people like her didn't actually change worlds for people like him. It's okay, Thomas said quietly, still holding Clarice. We'll figure it out. It's not okay. Vivian's voice cracked. I'll call him. I'll fix this. You can't fix everything, Vivian. Watch me. She stormed out, dialing her father's number with shaking fingers. He answered on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call. What are you doing? Vivian demanded. Business, something you used to understand. Thomas Baxter has a daughter. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve. Richard's laugh was cold. Since when do you care about what people deserve? This is the real world, Vivian. Contracts expire, people are replaced. It's not personal. It is to me. Silence. Then, carefully, "What exactly is this janitor to you?" Vivian's throat tightened. "He's my friend. Friends don't pay your bills. Friends don't build empires. Maybe I don't want an empire." The words exploded out of her. "Maybe I want to be someone Mom would have been proud of." The line went deadly quiet. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was ice. "Don't you dare use your mother to justify this rebellion. She would have helped him. You know she would have. Your mother is dead, Vivian, and sentiment doesn't keep companies alive." The call ended. Vivian stood in the empty hallway, her heart hammering, her world tilting. She just declared war on the most powerful man she knew, and she had absolutely no idea how to win. But as she walked back toward the storage room, toward Thomas and Clarice, and the fragile, terrifying feeling of actually caring about something, she realized something crucial. Maybe winning wasn't the point. Maybe just fighting was enough. The email came at 11 p.m. that night. Termination notice, Thomas Baxter. Effective immediately. Severance, $800. Reason, contract restructuring. Vivian stared at her laptop screen, her father's corporate signature at the bottom. Cold, efficient, final. She called Thomas. It went to voicemail. She drove to his apartment, a small unit above a laundromat in the old part of town. The lights were off. The next morning at school, his cleaning cart sat abandoned in the hallway. His locker was empty. "He's gone," the head custodian told her. "Picked up his final check this morning. Didn't say where he was going." Vivian felt her world crumbling. What about Clarice? Withdrew her from school, said something about moving back to his hometown, starting over. For 3 days, Vivian searched, called hospitals, shelters, every contact she could think of. Nothing. She left voicemails. "Please, just let me know you're okay. Both of you." Silence. On the 4th day, she sat alone in the library where they talked, staring at Clarice's crayon drawing of the girl with the sunshine crown. "Professor Chen found her there. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I destroyed his life," Vivian whispered. "I tried to help, and I made everything worse. You tried to do the right thing. The right thing got him fired. Got Clarice taken out of school. They're gone because of me." She crumpled the drawing in her fist, then immediately smoothed it out again, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 4 years, Vivian Corleone had let someone matter, and they disappeared. On the 7th day, Vivian stopped going to classes. She sat in her penthouse, surrounded by luxury she never earned, and finally understood what Thomas had tried to tell her. Money couldn't fix everything, but maybe it could fix this. She opened her laptop and did something she never did before. She accessed her trust fund, the one her mother had left her, the one she was supposed to touch at 25. $4.2 million. Her father's lawyers would be furious, but her father had already taken enough. She made 3 calls. First, to a private investigator. "Find Thomas Baxter and his daughter. I don't care what it costs." Second, to the Academy's board. "I'm making a donation. Full scholarships for every staff member's child. Medical coverage included. Non-negotiable." Third, to her father. He didn't answer. So she left a message. "You taught me that power means making hard choices. So here's mine. I choose people over profit. I choose Mom's values over yours. And I choose to be someone worth knowing. The restructuring ends, or I go public with every corner you've cut, every person you've crushed. Your choice, Dad." She hung up, hands shaking. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. Her father's assistant. "Mr. Corleone has agreed to your terms. The contracts are reinstated." Vivian closed her eyes. "And Thomas Baxter? His position is available if he wants it. Make sure he knows that, please." 2 hours later, the investigator called. "Found them. Homeless shelter on 14th Street. They're okay." Vivian grabbed her keys and ran. The shelter smelled like industrial soap and old coffee. Vivian found them in the common area, Thomas filling out job applications, Clarice coloring quietly beside him with donated crayons. When Clarice saw her, she gasped, "You found us!" Thomas looked up, his expression unreadable. Vivian walked over slowly, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to help and I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin anything," Thomas said quietly. "You lost your job, your home. We lost a job. We still have each other." He gestured to Clarice, who was already showing Vivian her new drawing. "That's what matters." "But it's not enough." Vivian's tears fell freely now. "You deserve stability, security. Clarice deserves a real school, not..." She deserves to see people fight for what's right, Thomas interrupted gently. Even when it's hard, even when it costs something. You showed her that. You showed me that. I got you fired. And then you fought back. You stood up to your father. Do you know how rare that is? Thomas stood, facing her. Vivian, you really changed. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It's everything. Clarice tugged Vivian's sleeve. Are you still our sunshine? Vivian knelt down, eye level with the little girl. I want to be, if you'll let me. Clarice threw her arms around Vivian's neck. You already are. Vivian held her tight, then looked up at Thomas. Your job is waiting. Full salary, benefits, medical coverage for Clarice, and I set up a scholarship fund for staff families to get priority. Thomas's eyes widened. Vivian, you didn't have to. Yes, I did, because you taught me something my father never could, that people aren't transactions. They're not expenses to cut or assets to manage. They're people, and they deserve to be fought for. Thomas's voice was rough. Your mother would be proud of you. Vivian's tears came harder. You really think so? I know so. Drop a comment below if this story touched your heart and hit subscribe, because we're just getting started with these unbroken truths. 6 months later, everything was different. Thomas was back at the academy, not just as a custodian, but as the newly appointed director of facilities. The board had created the position specifically for him after Vivian's donation transformed the school's approach to staff welfare. Clarice was thriving in 4th grade, her artwork displayed in the main hallway. She started an after-school art club that brought together scholarship students and legacy families. Somehow, a 9-year-old had done what administrators couldn't. She'd built bridges. And Vivian? Vivian had transferred to a local university, studying social work. She still lived in the penthouse, but most nights she was at community centers, homeless shelters, youth programs, anywhere she could turn her privilege into purpose. Her relationship with her father was complicated. He honored their agreement, but they spoke rarely. When they did, the conversations were shorter, colder than before. But her mother's foundation? That was thriving. Vivian had taken over as director, restructuring it to actually help people instead of just managing optics. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Vivian found Thomas and Clarice at their usual bench behind the school, sharing sandwiches. Room for one more? She asked. Clarice beamed. Always. Vivian sat down, and Clarice immediately handed her a drawing of a new one. 3 figures under a yellow sun, but this time they weren't just holding hands. They were dancing. You added movement, Vivian observed. Because you're not stuck anymore, Clarice said matter-of-factly. None of us are. Thomas smiled at Vivian over his daughter's head. She's right, you know. You freed all of us, yourself most of all. I had good teachers, Vivian said softly. We learned from each other, Thomas replied. They sat in comfortable silence, eating sandwiches in the sunshine, 3 people from completely different worlds who somehow became family. Later, as Vivian walked back through the academy's halls, she passed the gallery where her old painting had hung, the dark, chaotic one, filled with gray and black. It is gone now. In its place was a new piece, a collaboration between Vivian and Clarice. Abstract shapes in every color imaginable, swirling together in joyful chaos. The title placard read, Remembering How to Feel, A Journey from Darkness to Light. A freshman stopped beside her, studying the painting. Did you really make this with the custodians, kid? I made it with my friend, Vivian corrected gently. The student looked surprised. That's actually really cool. Yeah, Vivian smiled. It really is. That evening, Vivian's phone buzzed. A text from her father, the first personal message in months. Your mother used to paint too, before the company consumed everything. I'm glad you remembered that part of her. Dad, it wasn't an apology, it wasn't a revelation, but it was something of a crack in the armor. Vivian typed back, maybe we can both remember, together, slowly. The response came 5 minutes later. I'd like that. Vivian smiled, tucking her phone away. She learned something crucial over these past months. Healing wasn't linear. Growth wasn't perfect, and sometimes the most broken people had to break a little more before they could rebuild into something stronger. She thought about Thomas, who lost his wife but learned to love deeper. About Clarice, who saw sunshine in everyone, even the people others had given up on. About herself, the girl who built walls so high she forgot what it felt like to let anyone in. And about the unbroken truth that had saved them all. that sometimes the people you least expect become the family you need most. That kindness isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing a person can do. And that it's never too late to remember how to feel, how to fight, and how to become someone worth being. Vivian walked out of the academy into golden afternoon light, pulled out her phone, and texted Thomas, "Same time tomorrow? I'll bring the sandwiches." His response was immediate, "We'll bring the sunshine." And for the first time in 4 years, Vivian Corleone went to sleep that night knowing she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was truly living, and that made all the difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story moved you, please drop a comment sharing your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Unbroken Truths for more incredible stories that will change the way you see the world. Where are you watching from? Let us know below. Until next time, remember, we all have the power to be someone's sunshine.